good morning and welcome to this edition of Healing Moments with Martha. I am super excited to be able to bring this absolutely fantastic interview to my audience today. I am interviewing Skip Stokes, who is an author and a writer and a director. And I am excited. He is from Nashville, Tennessee. Welcome, Skip. Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
It will be fun. And so I am just delighted. I came to hear of Skip originally through a mutual friend of ours, David Hampton, who is, as you might know or may not know, he is an addiction counselor. But that's how I originally came in touch with Skip. And so with no further words needed to introduce Skip, thank you again. And if you would, Skip, tell us a little bit, who is Skip Stokes and what is he all about? Where did he come from and where did you grow up? All those fun things.
Yeah, I grew up in Springfield, Missouri, so the birthplace of Bass Pro. I lived there basically. Well, I lived there until my late 20s, and I moved to Nashville to kind of get a new start and try something a little different. And after moving to Nashville, I kind of got distracted for a little while and dove in a little bit deeper on my adult beverage consumption. And after a while of that, I met the love of my life. I met a unicorn, a born and raised Nashville native, and ended up getting a job working in a church. So that was a flip. But I was still totally enjoying the adult beverage consumption at the rate that I was previously. And it actually took me going on a trip to Thailand to shoot a documentary and kind of having some revelations about some things that maybe that was a problem. Quit drinking and also quit working in the church.
Were those related a little bit? No,
my neighbor across the street, after I stopped drinking, asked me one day if I wanted to have a beer, and I said, no, I'm good. I don't drink anymore. And he said, wait, you drank when you worked at a church, but now that you don't work at a church, you don't drink anymore? And I said, well, working for God's a little extra stressful. So, they had a good time with that. And
sure.
from that point on, I've just been trying to tell stories through moving pictures and working in any capacity that I can with that.
I love it. So did you, so you moved from Springfield to Nashville, met the love of your life, your unicorn. I love the way you describe your wife. That's darling. So may I ask, the documentary in Thailand, that was like a pivot point. What was that documentary on, may I ask?
Yeah, certainly. So my mentor during my time working at the church, his name was Ken Rideout. And Ken was kind of a forward-thinking missionary. He spent about 44 years in Thailand. And his approach to his work in Thailand was not to try to bring Christianity in as a new concept, but instead to understand the Buddhist mindset and see where the connections were. And he spent a lot of time, before it was cool to say that you were deconstructing your faith, he spent 44 years of deconstruction and reconstruction of what he believed in order to understand better what the Buddhist believed. And Ken was famous for saying one main phrase, which was, if I say anything to you that isn't true to you, go ahead and forget it. It's not important. He genuinely believed that the truth is something that is eternal and always true. And that if you say something that is genuinely true to someone, they will absolutely acknowledge it. And when he found out
what a beautiful concept.
Yeah.
That's
Ken
so
was
freeing. I mean, you just don't hear of that very often. That was a beautiful gift to people that he served. And
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, and Ken would also hit you with one every once in a while. He would say, "Is everything you believe true?" And you just sit there and think about it and go, "Huh, well,
Wow, what a deep question.
maybe not. I don't know. I don't. I
Maybe
feel
not.
like this is a trick question."
Yeah,
But
right.
Ken suffered a heart attack and found out that he had congestive heart failure. He was in his 80s,
Oh,
and the doctors said, quite frankly, the only thing we can do at this point is to keep you comfortable. And we're not going to be able to cure this condition. And he said, well, if the only thing you can do is keep me comfortable, then I'm going to move back to Thailand so that I can live out my days there and finish out my life in a country I
hmm,
love.
wow,
And when he told me that, I just said, well, we've got to try to tell that story. And so the film is
absolutely.
the film is kind of a combination of the story of a man going home to go home, but it's also an exploration into a student of his, me, trying to kind of follow his footsteps and figure out what he was all about.
I love that. Wow, what a
Yeah.
beautiful mentoring for you and for
Yeah.
him. Because
Thank you.
as you know, that as we live our lives and pour our lives into other people, that's where it gets good. I mean,
Right.
that's really why we're here.
Right.
And so thank you
Agreed.
for sharing that. Is
Sure.
that a documentary? Is it available for viewing for the audience, or where is it? It's
Yeah.
archived somewhere?
So it is available. It's we learned a lot. We thought we could just make a documentary and then sell it to Netflix and call it a day. Turns out not so easy. And so after a lot of attempts at trying to find a place for it to be available, we ended up just putting it on YouTube for free. And so the first film is, it took us 5 years to make a YouTube video, um, but uh, but it's out there and it's viewable. It's called One Last Summit, and it's on
Okay.
the 1028 YouTube page.
Okay. So
Yeah,
1028 that's your YouTube
that's the
page?
name of the company. Yeah.
That's the name of your company. Gotcha.
Mhm.
So, all right. I love that one. Excellent. Well, I look forward to watching that. Uh,
Oh, thank you.
I do, and sharing, because that'll be interesting to hear. Uh, I was in hospice for a while, and so it's always interesting to me what happens in someone's life as they get ready to go home. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Um,
Yeah.
so you moved to Nashville, got married, did the thing on Thailand, and then had this aha moment, pivotal moment about, maybe I have a problem. So once you realized that there was a problem with your consumption of alcoholic beverages or adult
Mhm.
beverages,
Mhm.
what happened for Skip then at that point? What was your next step in addressing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my best friend from back home, we all got together in Springfield, Missouri one weekend, and this was before the trip to Thailand. And when we would get together, we would all catch up, um, both story wise, but also consumption wise, and just have a grand old time. And I noticed immediately that Maddie wasn't drinking, and I said, "Hey, are you going to have a drink?" And he said, "No, I'm not. I actually quit." And he said, "I actually joined a super secret society of ex-problem drinkers. We meet in church basements and drink bad coffee, which is my way of honoring the 11th tradition of said group." Um,
Right,
and
right,
and it kind of rattled my cage a little bit because I thought, well, Matt doesn't have a problem, right?
right. Yeah.
So over the next few months, it kind of rolled around in my head, and then one night, I think this was after I got back from Thailand. One night, I used to go out into the shed and I would drink a couple of beers and smoke a little cigar and just write some stuff in a notepad or something and just kind of journal. And it was my Ernest Hemingway kind of romantic notions, right? I mean, you said you introduced me as an author. I will correct that as much as I don't want to. I'm not actually an author. I am a writer,
Okay.
but I don't get
All
to
right.
call myself an author. So as much as my
Okay.
ego wanted to swim in that pond, I think I do need to
Oh,
be honest.
no, I
Um,
appreciate that, Skip. Thank you.
yeah. I was on, I pulled my computer out and I decided to do a web search for, are you an alcoholic?
Mm. Watch
I,
out for those searches, man.
so
He's
I,
gonna
so
get
I,
you, right?
I took the test and I like to say I passed with flying colors. I did really well on that test. Like I answered all of those questions
Also,
correctly.
check, check,
And,
check, right?
and
Yeah.
it's weird because I usually have test anxiety and, you know, uh,
But that's why
and
we drink, because we have test anxiety, right? So,
right. Yeah. And so I thought about it and I thought, well, maybe there is a problem. And, in hindsight, I think that the proof in the pudding is the fact that I took the test in the first place. I think that's a pretty
right,
good sign that there might be
yeah,
something going on.
right.
So I had an interesting little moment with some friends around a fire pit where I kind of intentionally had my last drink. I did it in a controlled setting where it's very strange that I did it this way. But the next night I went into my first meeting, and that night I
Wow.
picked up a surrender chip, and yeah,
There
here
you
we
go.
are.
Here you are. Wow. I love it.
Yeah.
I mean, God just works in all kinds of mysterious ways. I love the fact that you intentionally went and had my last drink with friends. Yeah, this is going to be it for me.
Yeah.
Um,
And I will point out I didn't tell any of them that that's what that was.
I was going to ask. Okay.
I had my wife every year for Christmas would buy me a really nice bottle of scotch. And
Gotcha.
I had a bottle that had sat on my shelf for over a year. And it was a Macallan 18-year-old scotch.
Ooh,
And
that's nice stuff. I mean, I know a little bit
yeah,
about liquor. Okay. So
yeah.
there you go. Yeah. No,
And
it's good stuff.
and and so what I did was I'm kind of a romantic. The first time that I really had scotch was in a styrofoam coffee cup in the back of a tobacco shop in Springfield, Missouri. And it was a really nice scotch, but it was in a styrofoam cup. And so what I did was I invited some friends over and I brought out a bunch of coffee mugs and I gave everybody a little bit until it was gone.
Gotcha.
And and we all sat and sipped on fancy scotch for a while out of a coffee mug. And I didn't tell anyone that this was kind of my hurrah. I just let it be an evening, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it was several months before I actually told those guys, hey, by the way, I'm not drinking anymore.
But I think that's very wise on your part, because a lot of times it seems like, or this is my experience, when I'm ready to get rid of something in my life, as soon as I brag about, oh, the fact I'm going to not do it doesn't work out that way. Does that make sense? I
It
mean,
does. And I think that's probably like the undercurrent of what was going on. I don't think that I was wise enough at the time to articulate it in that way. I think what I wanted to do though was as much as I'm an egomaniacal artist who always wants everyone to look at them, uh, I didn't want the evening to be about why are you not going to drink anymore?
drinking more. Gotcha.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I
Yeah.
was like, I just
Right.
want to hang out with some people on a Sunday
Right.
evening around a fire
Yeah.
pit.
I love
I don't
it.
want the
Yeah.
whole evening to be a recount of every reason why I think that hiding a bottle in the back of the bar so that my wife doesn't know that I drank an entire bottle last night. I don't want that to be the conversation tonight.
Exactly. And
You know?
again, that was God's grace in your life, I think, in a
Yeah.
weird kind of way. I
Yeah, I'll
mean, he
take it.
offers his graces to us in different forms, and he just never shows up. He's smart enough not to show up in everybody's story the same way.
Right.
He's amazing like that. So did your wife, what is her name? You mind me asking?
Her name's Rebecca.
Rebecca?
I refer to her as the woman who calls me husband.
I saw that on your face. I
Um,
was like, oh my gosh, I
yeah.
love that. So the woman who calls you husband, did she at any point think that maybe you had a problem, or was she aware of it, or
Often.
were you kind of hiding it, or not really?
No, she often would. And over, you know, I'm going to dig into the deep end of the pool here for folks that don't understand, but there's a phrase in some of those meetings. I've been called a one chip wonder. because I went in, I picked up a surrender chip, and I haven't, knock wood, at this point, I haven't gone back out. But I kind of reject that term, because there were several times that I would quit for a while under her recommendation.
Gotcha.
And then I had it all figured out, and I went back and started again, and then here goes the cycle.
Yeah.
So she was aware that there was a problem, and thoroughly encouraged the notion of me maybe joining a group of folks that don't do that anymore.
Well, good on her. And
Yeah.
I would just say that, we can talk about this a little bit. We can stay in the deep end of the pool, because that's where I like to do
Yeah,
it. I'm
yeah.
not a shallow
Well,
kind of girl.
yeah, it's more fun
I
down
have to
there.
make some effort, to stay in the shallow end. But
Yeah.
the difference between her, as much as you love your wife, or the woman who calls you husband, as much as you love her, the difference between doing it for her and then, oh shit, I got a problem.
Right.
Can you expound on that? I mean, because that allowed you to own it more so, I think.
Yeah. Well, for me, there's a phrase, and I'm going to use, I'm going to quote this, and this may be upsetting, and I mean no disrespect. I'm just quoting the phrase. Faulkner said, "A writer without bourbon is like a chicken without his goddamn head." Okay. And I read that years ago and took that as a mantra, that I need to have my whiskey in order to be creative.
Wow.
Okay. So I had a strong association between those two things, and a romantic notion was attached to the idea that I'm sitting on a balcony in France, drinking a glass of wine and smoking a Gaulois cigarette while I'm typing away on my Royal typewriter. That notion was in there, right?
There's a
And
very
so,
romantic notion you
yeah,
had in your head. Gotcha.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing that kind of drove everything. So I had a genuine fear that I was going to lose that if I quit drinking.
That would make sense. Yeah.
However, it got to a point where I realized that I would put this stuff into my body so that the next day I would feel like crap because I put this stuff into my body.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you realize that you run a cost benefit analysis, and you realize that the return on investment is not great.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, a long way around to answer. I did not quit drinking for her. I finally realized that I needed to quit drinking for me. And I genuinely did it from the standpoint of, let me see if this works. I mean, I didn't go into my first meeting thinking, yeah, I'm going to go in here and I'm never going to look back. I didn't have that mentality. I went in and I was like, yeah, let's see what this is all about. And I was genuinely curious, right? Which I think was a good way for me to go in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, you nailed it. And it was a very honest answer, because I think when we go to those meetings for the first time, I did ACA, adult children of alcoholics.
Okay.
And my sponsor was like, you got to go 6 times. Do not take your butt in there and go, oh, this ain't for me the first time.
Yeah.
And we have to genuinely give it a good go and be curious, as you said, and be willing to ask the questions. Even though I found that it was really a sense of relief to find out, oh, there are other people in this room who are just as bad off as I am, if not,
right.
I'm not the only one. Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Right? Who knew?
Yeah.
So you did the program with that. Did you do anything else besides the meetings, or was that pretty much it for you as far as kicking the addiction?
So at first it was just going to a meeting every 2 days. I found a space that I liked, and I went in there, and I would do a meeting every other day. Um, and then, started doing meetings every day for a little while. And then ultimately at one point you realize, hey, there's a whole lot of folks in here that keep talking about this sponsorship thing. And there was a fella in the rooms the first night that I was there that said something to me, that because you do the compare and contrast thing naturally,
Right.
and so I'm halfway through this first meeting going, okay, I might have chosen too hastily here, because I'm not relating to anything that I've heard. Like, I'm hearing, when you hear someone say, I was running naked down Nolensville Road, you're like, yeah, I haven't done that.
I haven't done that. Thank God I haven't done that
Maybe
one,
I
right?
have more work to do before I need to come in here. And then there was a guy that was sitting across from me down at the other end of the table. And he just said at one point, he just said it matter of factly. He said, a couple of beers in the refrigerator just kind of pisses me off. And I heard that, and I was like, oh no, I know exactly what he means. What am I going to do with 2 beers?
Yeah.
And I started, my brain
Wow.
just went into hyperdrive, and I realized it was like, how much time, energy, and effort would I put into, how am I going to justify to my wife that I want to go get beer, even though there's already beer in the fridge, knowing that those 2 beers aren't going to get me anywhere. So now I have to lie to her and say something like, well, I want a different flavor tonight, or I want something that's got da 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 da. And even the concept of that just really rattled my cage. So a few months later, when I kept hearing this got to get a sponsor thing, I just asked him. And
I don't
I'll
blame
never,
you.
and I'll never forget him asking. He just looks at me and goes, why would you ask me? And
Oh,
I told
wow.
him why. And he said, well, let me think about it for a few days. And he ended up walking me through several of the steps. And then we kind of parted ways as sponsor sponsee, but it was a beautiful experience. It's not like we were mad at each other. I found another sponsor to kind of walk me through the rest of the steps. I started sponsoring some people. And, today, I think that what I would say then, so to answer your question fully, what did I do? I took some suggestions, and I thought, what's it going to hurt to give them a try? Right. Um, if they don't work, I have more information of what doesn't work, but let's just give it a shot. Right.
Just in
And
case, right?
yeah, why not?
Why not? Right.
Clearly
Right.
everything I've been trying wasn't working very well. So let's try something else. And then, as far as today goes, I mean, there's just, the understanding, like Dr. Lloyd will talk about the difference between um, dependency and addiction, and just understanding those differences and recognizing that I am still addicted to it. I don't have the phenomena of cravings. I'm not physically dependent upon it, but I avoid being around it as much as possible, you know?
Gotcha. Yeah. So interesting two terms, addiction and
Yeah.
dependency. So sounds like you've done a little research on that, or somebody spoke well into that. I think you just basically answered my question, but what would you say was the biggest difference between, they're obviously connected. So what's the difference for Skip?
Well, so
Addiction and dependency.
the way I understand that is that dependency is and I am not a scientist. I am not a therapist. I'm a filmmaker. So this is going to come out probably with a Midwestern twang. But
That's okay.
you
We'll
know,
still love you. Okay.
my understanding is that dependency is a physiological withdrawal response of the body, and it has a finite time. It's got a shelf life, right? Um, and I'm not someone who ever experienced delirium tremens. I'm not someone who ever woke up in the morning needing to start drinking immediately. So I was never dependent upon alcohol. That's how I could kind of stop
Gotcha.
when I
Okay.
wanted and take a break when I needed to. There wasn't a physical dependency on it. Was I addicted though? Oh yeah, because when I did, and I love again what Dr. Lloyd says, his very simplified but compound answer to what is addiction is continued use despite consequences. And that's
Gotcha. Yeah.
absolutely me,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah. Right.
And the
Absolutely.
phenomenon of cravings, they for me they just went away over time. I mean, I went last night. I went with some friends to a Sounds game, and everybody wanted to meet beforehand at a little pub that's around the corner from where the ball game is. And several people asked me ahead of time. They said, "Are you going to be okay to come in there?" And I said, "Well, do they have water?" They said, "Well, yeah, I think they've got water." And I go, "I'm good." They're like, "You're
I'm
not
good.
going to be bothered by being
Right.
around people that are drinking." And I go,
Right.
"No, I'm not going to throw away this amount of time to taste something that I already know is not going to give me any fulfillment." You
Right.
know what I mean? I just
Absolutely.
so
Yeah.
now, but do I do that daily? No. It's very rare that I'm around alcohol,
Yeah.
but it's purposeful that I'm not around it so that if I am in a situation like last night, I'm not it's not that thing that's kind of it's not that sore in the back of your mouth that you just keep trying to tongue at to
Pick
try
up.
to
Right.
right.
Yeah. Absolutely. So let's dive into the current documentary that you're
Yeah, I'm
working
sorry.
on.
You've asked me only about 3 questions and I've answered like
No, no,
I've
no.
given
It's
you
all good.
Dostoevsky kind of answers, so my
It's
apologies
all
there.
good. It's but it helps the audience understand more about who Skip Stokes is, and uh,
Yeah.
and it leads up to this next question: is why this documentary? Why
Oh,
not another aspect of addictions? But you are making a documentary, if I understand it correctly, about the stigma of addiction. Is that correct?
that's absolutely correct. And the
Okay.
reason, the why is very simple. If you want a movie about addiction, there are a lot of documentaries about addiction. If you want a documentary about overdose, there's a lot of documentaries about overdose. If you want a documentary about the opioid epidemic or the crack epidemic, or you want a documentary about whether or not pot should be legalized, they're, they're all out there.
Yeah.
Our film is not made for that audience. My film is for the broad swath of society that continues to have a stigmatizing view toward people with addiction. I'm not making a film for people who already believe in this. I'm
Yeah.
purposefully making a film for people that don't believe in it. I've got the timeline on this little dry erase board back here, and the whole concept of the doc. Now that I'm working with a new editor, and we've kind of got a new kind of way of looking at it, is I got to convince you that this is a medical issue,
Mhm.
like first and foremost, because
Absolutely.
you, and
Yeah.
I don't mean you, but you as
Right.
society, a
Right.
lot of people are still buying the press from the 1900s where we think that everybody's just a crime prone, weak willed moral failure.
Right. Yeah.
And we're going to have to
Yeah.
change our wiring in our brain. So
Right.
the stigma has to be addressed. And the reason the
Yeah.
name of the film is Shame on Us,
Yeah.
the stigma of addiction, is because shame and stigma are so closely connected.
They are.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so I had to do that.
I love this. And oh my gosh, I just briefly, one of my own children was addicted. Um, and David Hampton graciously walked us through the whole process and helped getting him sober. He's been sober now for 5 years, but
Mm,
that whole stigma, you're right. And I'm so excited about the potential of this film because my mind just like popcorn going crazy, going, oh my gosh, there's just so many platforms that it will need to be on and available to. And but the rewiring of my own mind when I went to the family weekend, I had to
right.
leave everything I thought I knew about addictions at the door,
Hmm.
check it. And I think we, as a society, a community, culture, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
um, we have to be willing to do that, to check what we think we know about addictions and go, huh, I might be wrong.
Right.
And having kids that are now in their late 30s, I mean, yeah, in their late 30s, you know, that whole bullshit thing that they did during the Reagan administration was just say no.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm really excited about this. I think that it's a much, much, much needed documentary. So thank you for
Yeah.
being brave to do this. I mean, seriously.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a, you have to do your own work, right? And you've got to do your own, you've got to be willing to go into your own cubby holes and nooks and crannies in your mind. And I had to come to the realization that I myself, as a guy that was in meetings, had a very specific opinion about people that were drug addicts instead of alcoholics, right? Because in
Right.
my mind, I was saying, well, I'm not breaking the law when I go buy my drug of choice.
Right.
So you're breaking the law. You're either diverting pills or you're buying heroin or so I had this stigmatizing view against that. Never mind the fact that if you really play it all out, my addiction, if I quit tomorrow, I don't really have any sort of withdrawal symptoms. And if I start back up the next day, I don't have, I mean, I tell people all the time, in order for me to kill myself with my drug of choice, there's only three options. Okay. Option one is I pull a Nicolas Cage Leaving Las Vegas and I really do a lot of hard work in order to kill myself with alcohol. Well, that's going to take a lot of determination. Number two is I get behind the wheel and I kill myself or someone else or both, right? And then number three is I buy a bottle of scotch or bourbon at the liquor store that's been laced with arsenic. Those are really the only three ways that I can kill myself with alcohol that I can understand, right? Now, let's look at it from the other standpoint. So if we really want to stigmatize or lose the stigma, let's try to look at it from the other perspective. All right. So an addict, if they stop using immediately and they're a heroin addict or they're an opioid addict of any sort, if they stop using immediately and then go back to the same dose, they're going to overdose.
Yeah,
right?
they will.
Um, and if they just use too much in at any point in time, there's still the potential of an overdose. But then the third one, to go with the analogy of the arsenic, is nowadays we have the synthetic fentanyl that's being laced into everything.
Yeah.
And that is the way I look at fentanyl, is in the way of, well, if I go and put arsenic in my bourbon, I'll probably die. So, you know, if I look at it from that point of view, how in the hell am I going to stigmatize these people that have a chemical dependency on something that's changing the makeup of their brain?
Yeah, it does. And I think that's part of the lie that we have come to believe as a culture, is that, oh, we don't know, or people aren't aware of. And I didn't realize it until I saw the MRIs of the brain. And here it is on, you know, on heroin. And then after the person has been sober for 30 days, 60 days, and then a year and a half, and because God has designed us in such a wonderful way, there's actual healing that can take place and does take place in the brain. And it's just crazy. And so you're right, it does physiologically change the brain. So you can't just say no. It doesn't work that way. Yeah.
Right. But it's also, if I can, I don't want to keep you forever here, but if I can, I mean, there's just something you said about Reagan, and I totally understand that. And I get that, because the whole just say no thing, realizing, of course, that was a carryover from Nixon with the war on drugs, and understanding that every administration has all the way across have done things that were detrimental, be it to the crack epidemic, which was handled in a completely different way, as now the opioid epidemic. And there's a lot of factors there. But I do also think that one of the things that's not really talked about is what I call the evolution of thought. and it's not like I call it that. It's just I've heard that terminology, and I think it's true. We're getting more evolved in our thinking about the way these things look. And so my
Yeah,
hope is that as we keep kind of moving to a place of understanding and a place of compassion, we're going to recognize not only that the people that are dealing with opioid addiction or opiate addiction, that we need to give them treatment, we're also going to be able to reach back into the penal system and grab folks out who were incarcerated for the crack epidemic and be able to say, hey, you know what? That wasn't our best foot forward either.
it was
We
not.
need
Yeah,
to
right.
we need to repair that, and
Yeah, absolutely.
we need to help them as well, because that wasn't a
Absolutely.
very fair shake.
I know we're about 40 minutes into this, and I want to wrap things up. And I thank you for your time, but I just want to ask you two last questions, if I
Yeah,
may.
and I'll be brief with them. I'm sorry.
I know, no, it's all good. I just know you got things to do, so and I have things to do so today. But this could be a two-part segment, actually. Uh, how can the local church best respond to this? I mean, it's your documentary. Can you share with us how it's going to be distributed? Is it going to be for sale, or is it what's the deal on that? And how can the church help with that?
Yeah. So as far as the distribution of the film, we don't know yet, because we're still
Okay.
working on that.
All
And
right.
and part of that avenue is going to be film festivals. Part of that avenue is, I've got some feelers out to some different production companies that have relationships with the different platforms.
Good.
And so we're working on that. I can't answer that one. How can the church
Okay.
help with stigma is a better question, I think.
Okay.
And I
There you
think
go.
and I'm going to say this, and I say this as a guy that worked in a church. And so I mean this with absolute love and tenderness. Give us more than your basements and your bad coffee.
Amen. Yep.
Okay. Give us a
Absolutely.
place and recognize that that we're hurting, that we're alone, that we're desperate for connection. David Hampton always talks about
Absolutely.
the four legs of the
Yep.
stool, and
Yep.
connection is a huge one. And
It
if you
is.
as a church are built for community, then by God, give us a place in your community, right?
Yeah.
And don't
Absolutely.
judge
Yeah.
us for it. Accept us the way that we are. Because
Yeah.
if you're going to follow the model of Jesus, you're going to recognize that he hung out with the woman at the well at noon. Why? Because that was the only time she could go. Why? Because she was a Samaritan outcast.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So if you can't tell, I get a little passionate about this, but it's
Oh, I
like,
love it. Bring it.
it's you as the church, and I don't mean you specifically, but you as
Yeah.
the
Okay.
church have the clarion call in front of you to be the change of our entire society, to see the destigmatization of this disease. So
Yeah.
take up your road, or take up your cross and bear that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How's
I
that for a
love
little
it.
shorter and concise? Sorry about that.
No. I love the passion. Yeah. I mean, like, yes. Let's because yeah.
Yeah.
He dealt. His ministry was started in the margins. Hello, it wasn't in
Yeah.
the temple.
No,
You know,
it's and quite frankly, it stayed in the margins.
it stayed in the margin. Absolutely, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad because I'm in the margin. I don't know about you, but I'm in the margin. Okay,
Right.
so
Yeah.
um, I would just and I thought of Rex when I interviewed Rex Paul Schnelly. I don't know if you know him or
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
but
I know, Rex.
great guy. And he said this. It's sad that the church has the lowest emotional IQ of any community, and we do. And I think what you're saying is we've got to change that and re-educate ourselves to help, uh, you know, to help my brother, to help my
Yeah.
sister in the
Mm.
margins and make
Yeah.
place for them in community. And I think you've got a trailer that we'll be sharing. Is that correct? And how
That's
can
correct.
people where are you on your funding, and how can we help fund this
Oh my, yeah, that's a
fantastic,
huge one.
amazing
Yeah.
documentary?
Yeah. So we've raised 80,000. We've raised about 80,000, somewhere in there. 60,000 maybe. Yeah, we've raised 60,000. We've still got 90,000 to go.
Okay.
It's a
All
lot
right.
of money, but when you consider all the people that are involved and that they are worth being paid, um,
Absolutely.
my business partner and have already agreed we're the last to get paid, and that's fine. We want to get all the other stuff taken care of. But you can actually, there's a place on our website, which I think I sent to you,
Mhm.
that
You
says
did?
donate. And all the donations, they're actual donations because they're going through Second Chance Sober Living,
Absolutely. Love
which
it.
is a place that's near and dear to my heart. And so Second Chance is partnering with us, and you can contribute to them and then just put a note in there that it's for the stigma doc. Every little bit helps. I just got a check the other day from Strings for Hope, which is a local organization that takes old guitar strings and turns them into jewelry. And they made um, bracelets that said "No shame," and
I love it. Yes.
they provided 20% of their proceeds went to us. And so they sent me
Wow.
a check for
Yay.
some money. And I'm like, not only is it awesome that people are walking around with no shame bracelets, but we got a little scratch out of the deal. So we can keep kind of plowing through.
I love it. I love that. That is just
Isn't that great?
beautiful. It really is. It truly is. Well, Skip, thank you again so very much for sharing your story, for telling us who Skip is, and give our best to the woman who calls you husband. Love it. And
I will.
thank you again for all of this. I'll be sharing this edition of Healing Moment with Martha. I'll be sharing it on my Facebook and Instagram for all of you followers. And take a minute out. And as you look at the interview, take a moment out and consider how you can share about this much needed documentary and help us to break the stigma of addiction and fund this excellent documentary. Again, I am Martha Flowers, coming to you from St. Louis, Missouri, and Skip Stokes from Nashville, Tennessee. Thank you and have a great day.